Hi everybody, my name is Aditi Joshi. I work at Google Cloud. I'm in the Cloud AI / Core ML group here, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about AI and product management and how that's really revolutionized, or it has revolutionized, will continue to revolutionize the way that the discipline and the craft of product management. To give you a little background about myself, I used to teach product management in New York City for 6 years, taught thousands of students, mostly folks from the world of finance, Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan, that type. And we were really focused on the craft of product management. There's a lot of things that have changed since I taught in New York City. And a lot of my students had reached out to me and saying, hey, how has it changed? Can you kind of talk about that? So that's kind of how a lot of this came about. So in terms of the agenda, I have a lot of slides to cover. We'll see how far we get. If not, you can always reach out to me on LinkedIn, and then I can maybe send you the slides and answer any questions that you have that way. Feel free to kind of reach out to me on LinkedIn to get your, just if you want more, there's a lot of material. So if you want like books or articles or videos that I can share with you, happy to do that as well. Again, make sure you reach out to the right Aditi Joshi on LinkedIn. I have a really common name, so you may want to type in Google and make sure it's actually me and not someone else that you're reaching out to. And I bring that up because that happens a lot, more than you would think. Okay, so in terms of what we're going to be covering today, I'm going to talk a little bit about how is artificial intelligence going to fundamentally change the role of product management. The fact that we still have to be customer centric, but how does that change in this new world that we're living in? As a product manager, the communication and your communication style, the language that you use, how is that going to change? The fact that we all have to upskill in this revolution that we're seeing, and that includes me. And I'm lucky enough to be in a place where I have a front row seat to all of the great advances that are happening in AI. But even then, I feel like I constantly have to keep learning. Luckily at Google, we have a lot of internal classes. We have access to a lot of research scientists, postdoc who are PhD students and postdocs that I'm just lucky to have. But happy to share like at a high level where this world is going. I do want to cover some of the basics of artificial intelligence and really talk about how data will influence your machine learning models, because I think that's important to understand. Thinking about how does your mindset need to shift, and how do you manage those machine learning projects? And then the fact that you have this lack of control over this experience that we're creating, because it's no longer a deterministic world. We are now living in a probabilistic world. So the craft of product management definitely changes. We'll talk a little bit about data collection and what does the future look like. So does that sound good to everybody? If you feel like this is not what you wanted, just let me know. And then if you are looking for certain articles, I can always send them to you if you reach out to me on LinkedIn. Okay, so I'm just going to pause to see if this is good. Okay, perfect. All right, so let's talk about how does AI fundamentally change the role of product management, right? Everyone's talking about the fact this is the most significant tech revolution that we have ever seen, and I absolutely agree. But how does that change what we're doing, and how does it impact product leadership as a whole? So you want to think about the shift that's happening, and let me give you an example. If you're building a new recommendation system, what happened in the past is that as a PM, you would be working with a user experience designer to come up with a user interaction or an experience, specs around the layout, when and where to display these recommendations. You would talk about the behavior on interacting with them. And this can be extended to other recommendation engine use too, right? Like you're recommending friends in a social network. In LinkedIn, you're recommending certain articles, connections as part of LinkedIn, which is your professional network, or songs in a music app. But what's happening with a modern recommendation system, which uses artificial intelligence and essential machine learning models to power it, is that these kinds of product specs are really of no value to a machine learning engineer or a data scientist that you're working with. So what they need is data, right? And the systems that they're building are not necessarily coded, but they get taught. So all of a sudden, what you need to provide as a product manager changes. You have to really focus on particulars of the data that your customers will have. What information do these customers have about maybe if it's a job recommendation system or candidates that it's recommending? So all of a sudden, your system is functioning with a cold start. And now that's a brand new customer who hasn't actually amassed enough data for your system to learn. So, how are you evaluating if that recommendation system is good or not? So as you can see, this is completely different than how we did product management in the past. So this is what I mean when your role as a product manager will fundamentally change and you need to adapt to the AI innovation that's happening, which means that as a product leader, you have to acquire the knowledge and the skill set to be able to use these different tools and these strategies to drive that product success forward. Okay. I'm just pausing to see if there's any questions. Perfect. So now let's talk about the fact that the craft of product management, the frameworks that I used to teach several years ago in New York City are still in place. You're still focused on identifying the customer's pain points. You're still focused on what is the problem that your customer is facing. That hasn't gone away. You're still trying to identify all of the different solutions that would address that pain point that you've identified through a set of customer interviews and all of the different tools that are available to us and the different frameworks like Porter's Five Forces. You've still got Blue Ocean Strategy. All the frameworks that I used to cover before are still valid. So remember, AI is just a tool. It's not a magic wand. You still have to be able to collaborate, but now you're collaborating with a broader spectrum. You're talking to machine learning engineers, you're talking to data scientists, and you're translating all of these needs into AI-powered specifications. That's where things have changed. So you still have to understand your customer data, right? So understanding your model experience, what does that data look like is really important. Helping to kind of choose the model in partnership with your machine learning engineers is really important. And that choosing your model is dependent on two different things. What is the type of available data that you have, number one? And number two, what's the goal that you're trying to accomplish? And then your model type will be dependent on that. So things like problem mapping, pain point identification, all of the different solutions that we used to brainstorm through, I used to teach the Stanford D-School process, all of that stays the same, but now there's this additional layer, right? Where you're choosing your model, you're trying to figure out what's the data that's available to you, what's the goal that you're trying to accomplish. All of that has changed. And then from a communication standpoint, you need to become that bridge builder. You are that intermediary as a product manager between data science, right? Your machine learning engineers, your UX designers, understanding what your software engineers are building, working with your cloud architects. So again, your, I guess your radius and the people that you're talking to has expanded, and you have to bridge that gap between your technical teams and ensuring that alignment on your project goals and requirements have been met. So that cross-functional collaboration is really important, and you need to do that in a very digestible format for your stakeholders to be able to understand what they need to do. So what does that mean for product managers as a whole? You have to upskill in this revolution that's happening. And by that, you really need to understand basic machine learning concepts, algorithms, and tools that are out there. So I'm going to encourage you to take a lot of specialized courses and continue to learn, right? To be able to really demystify what's happening in this realm. And don't ever stop learning, right? Because like I said, I have front row seat to everything that's going on, but I still feel like there's so much that I don't know. So I have to keep learning so I can keep growing. And then embrace data literacy. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the basic concepts that you need to understand. I'm not sure. I know when you do seminars, like it's a broad spectrum in terms of the skill sets that people bring to the table. But I do want to kind of level set and then kind of give you some of the basics. And then you can reach out to me so I can give you more information depending on where you come in and where you sit in terms of your background when it comes to machine learning models and AI, the realm of AI. So some of the key takeaways for product leaders is real world use cases, right? Think about when you think about AI being used, people always think about like robots, right? They think about robots that are building your Tesla cars or self-driving cars, but realize that machine learning models have been used in personalized advertising for many, many years. But you want to be able to demystify that, right? You want to be able to figure out how did they deliver that product experience to you. It might be your Facebook feed, it might be the ads that Google is serving up, it might be what you see in your LinkedIn in terms of the recommendations of the people who might be of interest to you. So we're going to dive a little bit into the fundamentals of AI. We're going to talk about three different components. The first is the objective, the second, algorithms, and the third, which is data, which is powering your product. And then I want to make sure that you understand how important it is to define that objective for your AI algorithm, because that's going to influence your product outcome. So demystifying that is really important. What I want you to kind of really think about is, what do I mean when I say really understand the core objective of that AI algorithm? Because once you define that objective, then you can choose, with the help of your machine learning engineers, the appropriate algorithm to be implemented. Let me give you an example. For ads, an objective might be that you want it to be very relevant. Why is relevance important? Well, if an ad is relevant because you're going on a trip and you need hotel recommendations, that is going to be a critical marker of your success. Now, based on an objective that you've chosen, you want to be able to figure out which algorithm is appropriate for that particular objective to be accomplished. So to understand the fundamentals of AI, again, remember there's three components. So I just want to try to break it down. There's the objective, there's the algorithm, and then there's the data. Setting up these three components correctly is going to be really essential for your product to be successful. So going back to that AI objective, you want to make sure that there's no unexpected side effects. I chose the example of ads being relevant, right? But you want to make sure that an unexpected side effect doesn't happen. An example would be, you're talking to your friend about going on a trip to the Caribbean. You log into your Facebook account and all of a sudden you're seeing ads around Caribbean hotels. All of a sudden that might be a little creepy. So you have to be really thoughtful in terms of the experimentation and making sure that your objective is helping you accomplish success in the product that you've built, but you don't see these creepy side effects, right, that are unexpected. So you may have to tweak it. And there's small nuances in defining your objective that can dramatically alter your outcome as a whole. So getting to that precision, it's sort of an iterative process to be able to get there, but it's something that is done through continuous prototyping. So let me just pause to see if there's any questions.
There are actually a couple of questions. Perhaps if you think it's best, I can bring them up.
Are they relevant to what we just covered, or are they separate?
Maybe a few slides ago, so perhaps maybe it's best to address them at the end as well.
Okay.
Okay.
Maybe we leave it to the end and then we can kind of go back if that works.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's good.
So we talked about those three things, those three components that you need to understand. Let's kind of break down the middle part, the second component, which is the different algorithms that are out there. You can broadly categorize them into three buckets. There's several others, but just because in the interest of time, I'm just going to focus on the top three for now. And then if you want to learn about the others, let me know, and I'll send you a couple of research papers that can address and answer some of the questions that you have around the others that are available to you as well. The supervised learning algorithm, that's fantastic when you are trying to classify observations and you've got specific labels. The classic example that you always see in textbooks is sorting emails into spam or not spam. So that's an example where a supervised learning algorithm is being used. The second big bucket is unsupervised learning. This is what is actually most popular right now. And so what you see with Amazon or when Netflix is making you recommendations, you'll notice like Netflix is always asking you for a thumbs up or thumbs down. Even in the very beginning, when you created your Netflix account, it was like asking you questions about what you like, your preferences, your dislikes, because it's starting to learn by identifying patterns and it's making observations without those predefined classifications. So that's the bucket of unsupervised learning, and that's used a lot, especially in many of the online products that you are probably consuming on a day-to-day basis. And then there's the third big bucket, which is reinforcement learning algorithm. This is used mostly in robotics. It's used in gaming. It's what self-driving cars are implementing. And also the most famous example is like AlphaGo, which within 4 hours of training, it was able to beat master champions, like world-class champions. So that's how powerful reinforcement learning can be. And that actually just learns through trial and error. So those are the three big class buckets of AI algorithms. Again, there's a lot more, and I can send those over to you if you want. The other thing that I want you to understand is that when it comes to the algorithm itself, there's two, like, again, I'm making, this is very broad, just in the interest of time, but there's two aspects of it, like two big aspects that you need to kind of grasp. The first is this concept of features, right? Think of that as like a personalization knob. So an example would be with Amazon search algorithm, the knob, the personalization knob might be around price or brand or the shipping cost. These are like features, these algorithm features are just variables and they're helping the algorithm learn and improve so they can serve you a much more personalized experience. The second aspect of the algorithm itself is something called constraints. They just limit the flexibility of what is being offered to you. An example would be, let's say you have an app where it's suggesting recipes to you. And so one of the constraints that you may want to build in is if your customer has high blood pressure, you want to make sure that in that meal design algorithm, you're trying to avoid salt in those recipes. Or if that person has diabetes, then you want to make sure you are suggesting recipes that are low in sugar. So those are the two aspects of the algorithm itself. So we talked about the first, which was objective. Then we talked about the second big bucket, right? And then the third part is the data that powers that AI. So data is the fuel for your AI. It's what powers everything that you do. And if you don't have quality data, then you're not going to get a quality product. When you're thinking about data, you want to think about the quality that you're putting in because everything that you see as a result of it, garbage in, garbage out, right, is going to be a result of that. A lot of data is usually good for the models because what happens is that it just provides robustness and then it drives effective AI solutions as a result of that. So that strategy that you put into place from a data perspective will enhance the performance of your machine learning algorithm. So what you're starting to see is like there's this mindset shift that's happening, right? And as a AI product manager, it's really important to like think about it as a beginner. Have that beginner's mindset, even if you've had product management experience for decades, because there's old ways of thinking that are important in terms of the craft of product management. So all those frameworks that I used to teach in New York City a few years ago, they're still relevant, but you still need to embrace AI principles. So some of it is like unlearning some of the product principles that I used to teach so that you're fully embracing the AI first approaches. Let me give you like an example of what I mean by that. When it comes to problem mapping, so I used to talk about problem mapping a lot. And we used to talk about, you have to resort to AI methods once you've identified what that business problem is that you're trying to solve. There are traditional methods that I used to recommend, and those are things like rules engine. But what happens is sometimes those rule engines that I used to teach, they don't necessarily adequately address the user's pain point. An example would be if you're in the customer service domain. The business problem might be you need to accelerate the resolution of customer service tickets. And sometimes this common problem is a result of the long resolution times in customer service. And that happens because your tickets, the customer service ticket, might be miscategorized. And the more that ticket is bouncing around between departments, the longer it's taking it to resolve, which then frustrates a customer. So as an AI product manager, that mindset shift that you have to go through is you're still analyzing the problem like we used to way back in the day, but you need to think about, could it be solved by other means that are faster, that are easier to build with AI? So instead of using like a rules engine and a workflow system to attempt to categorize cases correctly on the first try, your problem may still persist because sometimes these rules and these engines have fallen, they're maybe outdated. And even if they're current, they might require these rigid inputs that don't necessarily then match the range of human language that you often find in service tickets. So as an AI product manager, that mindset shift that you have to do is, okay, after you've done that analysis, you start uncovering this opportunity to use from prior successfully resolved tickets. So this is where you can take a high-level business problem and you can turn that into an AI solution. So in order to be able to do that, you need to have data literacy. So you need to understand the right questions to ask about your customers' data to be able to succeed with an AI initiative. Is it the relevant data that's available to you? Is there enough data? Is it the kind of data from which that AI can learn? Is that data clean? Is it noisy? Because this may be something that's an unsupervised problem. So I want to go back to that book, Thinking Fast. You want to think fast and also slow about your user outcomes. When I say think fast, I want you to start developing an intuition when you're defining your objectives. And this takes practice to develop that intuition. You want to consider those immediate goals and outcomes. And I gave you the example of that customer service ticket that kept getting bounced around from department to department, right? Because maybe that rules-based engine that you applied that you thought was the right solution or the implementation isn't necessarily giving you the result that you're looking for. So you may want to think about, maybe this is an unsupervised problem that can be solved in a very different way by pattern matching. So then you want to be able to think slow about it, which means applying a thoughtful, data-driven approach to examining the nuances. Then you want to be able to validate your hypothesis, right? And you want to make sure you're not confusing causation with correlation. So this is something that I used to cover in terms of like metrics, making sure you understand that vanity metrics are vanity metrics and don't confuse causation with correlation. So there's this shift that's happening where you're now focused on AI-powered features and you're focused more on the data that you're collecting and the quality of that data instead of your traditional specifications from a UI UX perspective. You're thinking about what are the recommendation systems that potentially may get you the result that you're looking for. You're thinking about, maybe it's the data that you're collecting and you need to have a different set of product specifications to get the result that you're looking for. You're starting to realize that there may be something called a cold start because you may have limited data in the beginning. And the way that Netflix resolves that is that they start asking you questions in the very beginning and you're giving a thumbs up or a thumbs down. So that model is learning along the way about what it is that constitutes a good recommendation for you as a customer. And as a product manager, you have to collaborate with your software engineers, your data scientists. So you've got all these additional stakeholders that you're thinking about. Let me give you like another example to bring all of this to life, because this is like theoretical. So let's think about the world of acceptance criteria. I used to talk about acceptance criteria and how important they are in like the craft of product management way back in the day. So that still exists, but you need to define the criteria to determine whether or not you're ready to serve production customers. In traditional product management, your acceptance criteria might include feature completeness, the number of open bugs. Have you finished your particular product? But in AI product management, the key metric might have shifted now. It might be more focused on AI accuracy. Because data scientists have this broad set of machine learning metrics, and they focus on things like lift, precision, recall, depending on your particular business objective, an AI product manager needs to make a judgment as to which machine learning metric needs to be optimized. And at what point is that AI performing sufficiently and it's good enough to solve that customer problem? Then you want to be able to map that back to your top line business metric, which in the example that I gave you earlier might be case resolution time. Or in the case of sales, it might be sales lead conversion lift. So this is how acceptance criteria has now changed. The definition of it has now changed in this world of artificial intelligence. Let me give you another example, like in the sales domain, to sort of bring this like theory to life. So you've got sales executives and they're interested in increasing the number of incoming leads, but those incoming leads have to convert into sales because that's what drives revenue ultimately, and that's what is considered success for them. So AI-based lead scoring can provide a prediction for every incoming lead, because it's telling you whether or not and what's the likelihood of a lead converting into an actual sale, which brings them the revenue that they're measured against. So this can help the sales folks focus their time on the right leads. But as the AI product manager, you need to define the threshold of that AI accuracy such that its use will reliably lift the conversion rate of your customers' sales leads. So just want to pause right there. So hopefully this is kind of coming to life in terms of taking the theory that we're discussing and translating that into how do you actually implement it day to day as an AI focused product manager. So when you're managing your machine learning projects, you want to kind of focus on really 4 different things, right? Which is you want to take those ideas that you've had, that problem mapping, the old school pain point identification that we used to do in that craft of product management. But now you want to learn the practical steps to take these projects that are really machine learning projects from idea to execution and then into maintenance. You want to really focus how your data needs to be structured. So understanding that approach in data science is going to be really critical. And then once you've gained those insights, you need to really work closely with your machine learning engineers, your data scientists, and your cloud architects, your software engineers to design the right machine learning systems and technologies that will deliver against that. So guiding these machine learning projects from ideation to deployment, that's something that is very different in terms of what we used to do. And you want to make sure you're following industry best practices while doing all of that. And then realizing that you're not actually controlling the whole AI experience. Because I talked about earlier at the very beginning of the seminar where now we're not living in the deterministic world anymore. It's much more of this probabilistic world. So you have to adapt to that lack of deterministic control over the user experience that we were also used to. And then trust in the algorithm's learning process is going to be really important for you as an AI first product leader. So then quality data collection becomes really, really critical, because that impact of data collection on the type of data that you're collecting, right? That's going to be critical for building a robust algorithm, and then the success of your product will depend on it. And you may have to be creative in that data collection, right? Things like surveying a user within the product, so that in-product experience, and finding innovative ways to jumpstart that data collection, that's going to give you that growth opportunity. Just checking on the time. Okay, we've got about 20 more minutes. I have a few more slides that I want to cover, and then I can answer some questions because I think this is really important. So in terms of what's happening in the future, a lot of those three components that we talked about earlier at the very beginning of the seminar, which is really understanding that objective, understanding that second bucket, which is the algorithms, and then third part is the data that you put into it, because you don't want garbage in, garbage out. All of that is starting to get automated, and that really is the future of product management. You've got things like AutoML, you've got transfer learning, right? That's going to reduce that need for being able to intervene in the AI processes. And again, as your role and what you need to learn and focus on as an AI product manager will also change as a result of that. There's a lot of research that's happening in generative adversarial networks. I can send you research papers on that if you're interested. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. That really will explore automation with this realm. And then the other thing I want you to think about is the ethical considerations in AI. Google has put out AI principles that can provide insights into ethical AI developments. I'm happy to share that with you all as well, or you can just Google it too. Thinking about like explainability, thinking about ethics, thinking about bias as a product manager, this is all important, and it's a critical part of what you will be doing as an AI product manager. Being able to understand the question and answer that question, why did this AI just make the decision that it did, right? That's a common question that you're going to be experiencing. AI differs from traditional software in the sense that these outcomes are not based on a set of hand-coded rules. That's what we did way back in the day. So sometimes these explanations, you need to make sure you're able to explain it, and that behavior of that AI will continue to change over time as it continues to learn. So you have to be really thoughtful about explainability. You have to provide mechanisms to make AI-powered features more transparent. And it's really the key to unlocking the adoption of these features. You have to specify how these products are going to explain themselves to the user. And sometimes this involves like a trade-off. Some AI algorithms are more explainable than others. In some domains, there is high regulation. So let's take an example of like healthcare, where explainability will always beat accuracy. So your metrics as an AI product manager are going to change. Some of them will stay the same, but I want you to kind of think about why AI accuracy is so important when it comes to something like tumor identification. Being able to explain how the algorithm arrived at that particular analysis is going to be important. And you have to strike that right balance between the use case and the industry that you're serving. The other part that you also have to be able to do is you have to evaluate bias. Is the data that you have gathered representative, and is it diverse enough? Is there data in the data set that you've collected that can introduce unwanted or unethical biases like race or gender? And this is hard, but you have to realize that maybe gender is a crucial signal for AI in medical diagnosis applications. So you have to factor in gender there. But maybe it's irrelevant in predicting where job applicants are more likely to fit a job description. So it's up to you as an AI product manager to make those decisions on which data is ethically fit for a given application. So building that trust, being as transparent as possible, and as that AI PM, championing that explainability to make sure that you're building credibility with your customers and really doing the right thing is a critical part of what you do as an AI product manager. And then the other part is, as a product manager, you really have to be an evangelist in terms of driving that adoption within the company. You want to advocate for its integration. You want to demonstrate all of the advantages that you can offer. Think about scaling from research to production. So the attributes of production AI applications, which are delivered at scale, it's very different from what you've learned, let's say, in the data science project, right? Which is really still in its research stage. So engineers who are taking AI applications to production, like you have to make sure that the specifications around where that data is, like it's getting to where you want it to go in terms of, is it online in the cloud environment? Is it distributed across different mobile devices? You have to understand how quickly this AI needs to emit that output, right? Because real-time AI output can be very resource intensive for both the engineer and the machines. And there's other things that you have to consider, things like how often does this machine learning model need to retrain? What are some of the metrics that need to be computed to understand whether or not this performance is what you're looking for? What kind of feature engineering is required, right? Are you using some of the most cutting edge methods of solving a lot of these AI problems? Are they in academic publications? But then how do you scale that and transfer that into real world applications? So as that product manager that's like very AI focused and being that evangelist, you need to start building that intuition, that spidey sense around which problems to go after with foresight and which will actually make it into production. So like embracing that AI journey, right, is something that I don't want you to shy away from, right? I want you to make sure that you're collaborating, you're leveraging the insights that you're collecting because it really can deepen your understanding of the customer. And as a product manager, ultimately what you're trying to do is solve the pain point of the customer. And it's okay to fail, be ready for those setbacks. But make sure you're asking the right questions. I want to be mindful of time. I know we only have 15 minutes left. I have a couple more slides around product roadmaps, but maybe I'll just kind of table that and then we can talk about that if you reach out to me and some of the metrics that I want you to think about. And then I'll just transfer over to like maybe I can answer a few questions. I know there's a lot of questions that have been asked in chat. But just kind of to summarize all of this, and then we'll go into Q&A. Thinking about how your role is transforming as a product leader. That's going to be important. The fact that you need to continuously learn, never stop learning, never stop growing, and how you need to adapt and some of the different technologies that you need to embrace to make sure that you're competitive and that the customer demands are evolving and you're meeting the customer where they're at. So in terms of next steps, just to wrap it up, I want you to think about it in three different, I guess, buckets. Number one, I want you to deepen your understanding about AI. I talked about like objective, I talked about the different algorithms, we talked about the data that you're collecting, but a lot of this is through experimentation. The craft of product management, the principles stay the same, the frameworks stay the same, what I used to teach in New York City all those years ago. But now, because of all the great tools, you can actually augment your ability to do your job even better. For example, all of these slides that you just saw were created through an AI. I didn't create any of these slides. I had notes that I've taken in Google Docs, and I just transferred that into the slides. So I'd love to see your feedback. I think they're basically almost there, but I didn't want to touch it because I wanted to get your feedback and on what you thought about the slides that I actually didn't make, that an AI built for me based on the notes that I provided it in a Google Doc. I want you to consider the role in everyday experiences, and I want you to start building that AI intuition that we talked about and really focus on like tweaking that objective. Like think to yourself when you see something in LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram or X, what was that objective that that product manager was trying to accomplish? How do they tweak based on the data that they saw? So that's going to help you develop that intuition. And I want you to share your questions and your ideas with the community. And really, I'd love to hear it too, because that's the only way that you learn. is by asking the right questions and being able to get like your questions answered. Okay, so reach out to me. I have to jump. I have to go to a meeting. But this was awesome. Thank you so much for coming. I had no idea that all these people would show up. I thought it would be like several hundred people registered. So I'm shocked. So thank you. Thank you for coming. Reach out. I'll answer your questions.